Hello everyone, welcome to sqadia.com. We're talking about the development of ear. In this section, we'll deal with the middle ear. The middle ear is a cavity, a small slit-like cavity that contains the ossicles. So we'll see the development of the ossicles first. Then we'll talk about the mastoid antrum and the muscles of the middle ear. And finally, we'll talk about the pharyngotympanic membrane, its development and its function. So, getting into it, first of all, now the ossicles of the middle ear, they develop from the dorsal part of the first pharyngeal pouch. So you can see this is the first pharyngeal pouch, so the dorsal part of the first pharyngeal pouch, and there's a little contribution from the second pharyngeal pouch. Both of them and the distal part of the tubotympanic recess. So the distal part of the tubotympanic recess, all of these help in the formation of the middle ear or the tympanic cavity. Now the extension of the tympanic cavity forms the mastoid antrum and the mastoid ear cells. So how is the tympanic cavity formed? The tympanic cavity is formed by the first pharyngeal pouch and a little contribution from second pharyngeal pouch along with the distal part of the tubotympanic recess. Now these contribute to the formation of the middle ear or the tympanic cavity. Now, the extension of this tympanic cavity, it produces the mastoid antrum as well as the mastoid ear cells. So, the ear ossicles are initially embedded in the mesenchyme. So, they develop being embedded in the mesenchyme. There are three ear ossicles. These are the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Now, the malleus and incus, they develop from the cartilage of the first pharyngeal arch. This cartilage is known as the Meckel's cartilage. So, the malleus and incus are actually derivatives of the Meckel's cartilage, which is the cartilage of the first pharyngeal arch. Now, stapes, on the other hand, it is formed from the cartilage of the second pharyngeal arch, which is known as the Reichert's cartilage. So, Reichert cartilage is responsible for the production of stapes. You can remember it by stapes starting from S and second cartilage starting from S again. So that is how you can remember the development of stapes from Reichert's or the second pharyngeal arch cartilage. Now, what happens? There's dissolution of the mesenchyme that is surrounding these ear ossicles. Now there's extension of the endodermal epithelial lining of the primitive tympanic cavity. So the endodermal lining, which was lining the primitive tympanic cavity, now it undergoes extension and it extends along the newly developing space. It is now encroaching on the newly developing space, this endoderm. Now it connects connection of the ossicles with the wall of the tympanic cavity in mesentery-like fashion takes place. So there's a mesentery-like connection of this dissoluting mesenchyme with the walls of the tympanic cavity. Now the supporting ligaments of the ossicles, they develop at this point in time. Later on the development proceeds with these supporting ligaments, and these ligaments develop within the mesentery themselves. Now moving on, let's talk about the mastoid antrum as to how the mastoid antrum develops. So there's dorsal expansion of the tympanic cavity that gives rise to the mastoid antrum. We've talked about it before that the tympanic cavity is initially formed by the first pharyngeal pouch, a little contribution from the second pharyngeal pouch, and the tubotympanic recess. The mastoid cavity and the mastoid ear cells are actually formed by the expansion of this initial tympanic cavity. So there's dorsal expansion here. You can see in the figure there's dorsal expansion of the this tympanic cavity, and this gives rise to the mastoid antrum. So it is almost the size of at adult size at birth. So even at birth, the mastoid antrum achieves its adult size. Mastoid ear cells are not present in the newborn infants. They develop with the development of the child. So mastoid ear cells, they tend to develop at the age of 2 years. So moving on, let's talk about the muscles of the middle ear. So what are the important muscles of the middle ear? So we have an important table that will help you to understand how the muscles work and develop and what are their relations with each other. So first of all, we have this tensor tympani muscle. Tensor tympani, here you can see in the figure. It is attached to the upper part of the handle of the malleus. So it is attached to upper part of the handle of the malleus. Here you can see in the figure. And it develops from the first pharyngeal arch like malleus, since malleus is also developing from the first pharyngeal arch. So the muscle that is attached to malleus is also developing from the first pharyngeal arch. And it is innervated by the mandibular nerve, which is a branch of trigeminal nerve, which is a nerve of first arch. The first arch nerve is the trigeminal nerve, and mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve supplies the tensor tympani muscle. Now let's move on to the stapedius muscle. So this is the stapedius muscle. Stapedius muscle is attached to the stapes. Here you can see it is attached to the stapes. And it arises from the second pharyngeal arch just like stapes, and it is supplied by the facial nerve, which is the nerve of the second pharyngeal arch. So there are two important muscles, the tensor tympani and the stapedius muscle. Tensor tympani, the muscle of the first arch, attached to the malleus, the upper part of handle of the malleus, and is supplied by the mandibular branch of trigeminal nerve being the nerve of the first arch. Then we have the stapedius muscle, which is attached to stapes. It originates from the second pharyngeal arch and is supplied by facial nerve, which is the nerve of second pharyngeal arch. Now let's talk about the pharyngotympanic tube. It is also known as auditory tube or the eustachian tube. So this is the pharyngotympanic tube, also known as the auditory or the eustachian tube. It connects the tympanic cavity, this is the tympanic cavity, with the nasopharynx. So pharyngotympanic tube is the tube that is responsible for the connection between the middle ear and the nasopharynx. So it is also known as auditory tube or the eustachian tube. So this was all about this section. In this section we talked about the development of the middle ear. We saw how the bones that were a part of middle ear were developed. Then we saw the muscles of the middle ear developing. Then we talked about the mastoid antrum as well as the mastoid ear cells, and finally the eustachian tube or the auditory tube. I hope you enjoyed this section. For further sections, keep watching sqadia.com.